What's going on, guys? So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through and pack my dad's wheel bearings and make sure my dad's wheel bearings are good to go for his 93 Chevy 1500. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get started taking off the wheels, the tires, and I'm going to go through step-by-step process on how to actually take the wheel bearings out and get them packed with a special tool to pack these wheel bearings and go from there. So we're going to go ahead and get started and go from
there. Perfect.
So the first thing you want to do is you want to get the truck lifted up, and what I've done is I've taken the jack, put the jack up underneath the truck, and then we're going to take the jack stand, put it on the frame of the truck so that we can make sure that the truck is stable, so when we start working up underneath the truck, safety wise, we're good to go. With the wheel off, obviously this is where you're going to have to take this cap off to expose the axle nut. But what you're going to see is back here you have to take your caliper off in order for you to get this whole hub assembly off. So back here, I don't know whether or not you can see it, but right here is a Allen wrench or Allen key. And what we're going to do is we're going to get the Allen key and we're going to take that off. Okay, so the Allen wrench that we're going to be using is a 3/8 Allen wrench, and that's what you're going to be taking the calipers off with. Alright, so what you're going to do is you're going to take the caliper off, and you're going to set the caliper off back here, and it should sit right there, no problems. Alright, and that exposes your rotor and your hub. Because now you want to take a little hammer, bring it over here so you can see. So you're going to take this cap off. Once you take the cap off, there's a cotter pin right here. You want to take this cotter pin off, out, and then you're going to take the actual axle nut off, and that'll expose the actual thing. So what I'm going to be using is a pick. I'm going to pull this side right here off, or back, and try and get the cotter pin as straight as possible. Take your needle nose pliers and actually straighten it out. Then you take your hammer, move it up, take your needle nose, pull your cotter pin out. Now that expose your axle nut, alright, to check and see if your actual axle nut is a little loose, you can just move it back and forth. Alright, there's a little bit of trash inside here. Alright, that's just a little bit of an inspection tool that you can see. Alright, so I have a 30 millimeter socket, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen up the axle nut. Should just come off pretty easy. If it's tight, if it's too tight, then you know you have a problem with your bearings, because your bearings are probably got a lot of tension under them. Or if it's really, really loose, obviously you might want to check your bearing race and make sure your bearing race is messed up. So We'll go through and I'll show you the inspection process after we get this off. And there's a washer right in here. So when you take your rotor, when you take your whole hub, you're going to pull it. Everything should come out as one unit. There's your bearing. So there's your bearing, your front bearing, and this is your washer. Now the washer should be flat on one end, and then it should have a groove on the inside on the other end. That'll come into play later. So now with your bearing out, what you want to do is you want to go through and wipe it down. Get all the grease off of it. And make sure you pay attention to your stuff. So if you notice, it has a little bit of a glitter in here inside of it. So you got to just make sure that it's not affecting anything with your bearing. So what you're going to do is so from the front side, you're going to hit the back bearing with a flat punch. So what you're going to do is the flat punch is going to sit off to the side of it. You're just going to barely tap it out on both sides. So now we're going to flip it over. And as you can tell, you have your rear seal, which has to be replaced. This is the reason why we have it here. But this has to be replaced whenever you actually put it back in. So we're going to go ahead and throw this away. And then this is your other bearing. So same thing with the front bearing, is you want to go through and you want to make sure that there's no nicks, no extra metal or anything like that inside of these bearings. So this one looks pretty good, as well as there's no nicks that I see on the thing. So we're going to get this cleaned up, get all the grease, all the old grease off of it, and then we're going to get these bearings packed. So you want to go through and just clean up the inside of these rings in here. Same with the back side. Take a t-shirt or whatever, old t-shirt, push it off in there. And what you want to do is you want to get all of this in here clean so that you can go through and just inspect it. This one's good, so we're going to go through and pack it now. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to make sure that the bearing itself, go around and make sure that you look at each one of these little bearing sidewalls and make sure there's no nicks, no nothing, no burrs, no metal or any debris inside of that, so that when you go to put it back in, you know that this bearing is good. If it has a nick or anything like that, what you want to do is you also want to check the inside of this race right here. That's where this bearing goes, and it basically rubs against this side, and make sure there's no burn marks, no scratches, nicks, or anything in that, because what's going to happen is that this bearing, when you go to actually put it in, it's going to ride against this, and it will eventually, if you have a burr in here, it's going to destroy this bearing and you have to replace it again. So make sure that that is the case. So the little tool that I want to show you is this bearing packer. So this bearing packer right here is a very simple tool. So what you're going to do is you're going to put this bearing in, and what it has is a little pusher. So you put this on top and you basically push it down, and what you're going to do is you're going to shove it as hard as you can down into all of this bearing grease, and as you can tell, it'll start pushing out of the bearing itself. And once it starts pushing out of the bearing's packed. You don't have to worry about actually going through and putting it on your hand and all of that stuff like the old school way. So now you have a packed bearing. Now that this bearing's packed, we're going to set it off to the side and we're going to get the back one done the same way that we just did the bearing packer for that. So this is the bearing packer. You're going to take the bearing, put it right here. It doesn't matter where you put it in here, as long as it's facing cone side down. I'm going to take the knob, stick it on top again, make sure that this is even pressure, push it down. And then you'll see it, once I take this off, it's packed all the way around evenly. So now that that is complete, we're going to get this section right here cleaned up, all in here, and then we're going to put our bearing back up. We're going to set it off in here, just like that. Alright, now we're going to take our rear main seal, and then we're going to put our seal in there. So this is our new seal. So what you want to remember is, you'll see the inside of this, it looks hollow, and then the outside it's got that lip. You always want to put the lip facing the back of the rotor, so make sure you just set it in there straight and evenly. And what you're going to do is I always take a rubber mallet to get it started around so that it doesn't hurt anything. And then once you get the rubber mallet to do it evenly around, then that's when you actually take your regular hammer and just make sure you lightly tap it around. Make sure it's in there. Alright, flush. Make sure this is flush all the way around. So now that this flush, what we're going to do is we're going to take and flip this back upright. And the bearing that you packed earlier, you're going to stick it in this front hole. Now that that's put in there, we're going to take the whole hub assembly and start reinstalling. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to put the hub assembly back on. With the hub assembly back on, make sure that all the bearings and everything are pushed in pretty well. Go through, I'm going to clean up this little washer before I put it back in. You see there's a flat part, and then there's a nook inside of it. That little nook goes inside of the side of the threads here. Just push it all the way back. And the same thing with the castle nut. I'm going to go ahead and clean up the castle nut. I'm going to show you what you need to do with the cap. Castle nut's all cleaned up, good to go. So now you're going to take and put the castle nut on. Alright, and a good rule of thumb is when you put the castle nut on, you want to tighten it up. As tight as you can get it, as hand tight as you can get it. Alright, and what you're going to do is you're going to get it to a point where it's clock. So this right here is straight 90, and what you want to do is you want to bring it back a half a turn. So what that means is it's at a 90, so now you want to bring it up, and that's half a turn. Once you get half a turn, then you want to spin the rotor and make sure it can spin freely. If it can spin freely, you're good to go. So now with it spun half degree, what I normally do is I take a pick and I go through and I check each thread to figure out where the hole is for the cotter pin, and I found the hole. It's on this side, then it comes to this side. So what you want to do is now you want to line your hole up so your cotter pin can go in pretty freely. Alright, so now what you're going to do is you're going to take and use the cotter pin, and you're going to put the cotter pin inside of that hole that we just lined up. Alright, now with your cotter pin back in, you want to make sure that you take your pick and grab one at a time. Don't try and do both at a time because it won't work as well. Whereas if you just take one pin at a time and pull it back, and then take the other pin right behind it and then pull it back. Alright, so now you have both of them back here. Now your castle nut is good to go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to clean this cap up, and once we get this cap cleaned up, we're going to take and fill it full of grease, and then we're going to put it back on. And once we get this filled full of grease, put it back on, we're going to put the caliper back on with the bolts, and then we're going to put the wheel back on, and we'll be done. If you like what you see, please like and subscribe.